The world map looks simple: bright colors, clean borders, every country neatly labeled, recognized, and agreed upon. At least, that's what most people believe. But what if I told you there are places on Earth that function exactly like real countries, complete with governments, borders, armies, and even their own money, yet officially they don't exist? No recognition, no legitimacy, no place on the global stage. And yet, millions of people wake up every day, go to work, pay taxes, and live their lives inside these invisible nations. So what are they really? And why does the world pretend they aren't there? To understand this, we need to step into one of the strangest places on Earth. A narrow strip of land squeezed between Moldova and Ukraine, a place frozen in time. Welcome to Transnistria. At first glance, nothing seems unusual. There are roads, schools, supermarkets, even public transport. But then you start noticing things that don't quite add up. Statues of Soviet leaders still stand tall. Hammer and sickle symbols decorate buildings. The atmosphere feels like you've stepped into a different era, one that the rest of the world moved on from decades ago. That's because Transnistria never really left the Soviet Union, at least not in spirit. In 1991, when the Soviet Union collapsed, most regions became independent countries. Moldova was one of them, but Transnistria refused to follow. It declared its own independence instead. A short war broke out, people died, and when the fighting stopped, Transnistria remained separate. Not officially, not legally, but in reality, completely independent. It has its own president, its own parliament, its own military, and even its own currency, the Transnistrian ruble. You can literally hold money in your hand that doesn't exist anywhere else on Earth. And yet, no major country recognizes Transnistria as a nation. Not one. Which raises a strange question. If a country has everything a country needs, but no one recognizes it, is it still a country? Or is it something else entirely? And Transnistria is just the beginning, because scattered across the globe are other places just like it. Places caught in political limbo, existing in a strange gray zone between reality and denial. Take Somaliland, for example. Unlike Transnistria, Somaliland isn't stuck in the past. In fact, it's one of the most stable and democratic regions in Africa. It has peaceful elections, a functioning government, its own passport, its own currency, and a population that overwhelmingly sees itself as independent. But there's just one problem. The rest of the world still considers it part of Somalia, which means officially, Somaliland doesn't exist. Think about that. A place with millions of people, a working system, and relative stability is ignored by the international community. Meanwhile, Somalia, the country it supposedly belongs to, has struggled with instability for decades. So why is Somaliland not recognized? The answer isn't simple, because in the world of geopolitics, recognition isn't about reality, it's about power. Recognizing Somaliland could set a precedent. It could encourage other regions around the world to break away and declare independence. And that's something many countries fear, because if one region succeeds, others might follow. And suddenly, borders across the world could begin to shift. Which brings us to another mysterious place, a region where the conflict is even more complex: Abkhazia. Located along the Black Sea, Abkhazia broke away from Georgia after a brutal war in the early 1990s. Like Transnistria, it formed its own government, its own military, its own identity. But unlike Transnistria, Abkhazia has partial recognition. A few countries acknowledge it as independent, most do not. So it exists in a strange, in-between state, recognized by some, denied by many, fully real, yet partially invisible. And for the people living there, this creates a daily reality filled with contradictions. Travel becomes difficult. Passports aren't widely accepted. International trade is limited. It's like living inside a country that the world refuses to fully acknowledge. And then there's perhaps the most bizarre example of all: A country built on an abandoned sea fort, far out in the North Sea, sitting on rusting metal pillars above the water, lies something that calls itself a nation. Sealand. Population, sometimes less than 10 people. It has a flag, a national anthem, a royal family, and at one point it even issued passports. But here's the thing, Sealand started as a joke, or at least that's what many believed. In the 1960s, a man occupied an old military platform and declared it an independent country. And somehow, it stuck. Over time, Sealand gained attention, notoriety, and even faced legal battles over its status. While no country officially recognizes it, Sealand continues to operate as a self-declared nation. It sells titles like Lord and Lady. It has its own identity, its own story, its own claim to existence. So now we have to ask the question again, what actually makes a country a country? Is it land, population, government, recognition, or is it something else entirely? Because clearly the rules aren't as clear as they seem. Some places meet all the criteria but are ignored. Others barely meet any and still claim legitimacy. And the deeper you go into this world, the stranger it becomes. Because these invisible countries aren't just political anomalies. They are home to real people, real lives, real struggles. People who wake up every day in a place that exists, but isn't supposed to. And for them, this isn't a mystery, it's reality. But here's where things take an even darker turn. Because some of these places aren't just unrecognized, they are contested. And when multiple sides claim the same land, that's when tensions rise. That's when conflicts begin. And that's when the line between country and non-country becomes dangerous. Because in the end, recognition isn't just about maps, it's about control. And not everyone is willing to give that up. Imagine waking up one day and realizing your country might not exist tomorrow. Not because it disappeared, not because it was destroyed, but because someone, somewhere, decided it shouldn't be recognized anymore. That's the fragile reality of these hidden nations. Their existence isn't guaranteed. It's constantly questioned, constantly challenged, and sometimes violently disputed. Because behind every unrecognized country is a deeper story. A story of identity, of power, of people who refuse to disappear. Let's go back for a moment to a simple idea we often take for granted: borders. We see them on maps, we learn them in school, we assume they are fixed, permanent. But in reality, borders are one of the most unstable things on Earth. They change, they shift. They are drawn, erased, and redrawn over time, often not by the people who live there, but by those in power. And that's exactly why places like Transnistria, Somaliland, and Abkhazia exist. They are the result of history colliding with politics, of people deciding they want a different future, and the world refusing to accept it. But here's where it gets even more complicated, because not all invisible countries want recognition. Some thrive in the shadows, operating outside traditional systems, free from international regulations, free from oversight, and sometimes that freedom comes with risks. For example, some unrecognized regions become hubs for activities that are harder to regulate. Smuggling, untraceable financial systems, underground economies, because when you're not officially part of the global system, you don't have to follow its rules. And that creates a strange paradox. On one hand, these places struggle because they lack recognition. On the other hand, that same lack of recognition gives them a kind of freedom. A freedom that can be both an advantage and a danger. But let's shift perspective for a moment. Instead of looking at governments and politics, let's focus on the people. Because at the heart of every non-existent country are individuals trying to live normal lives. Students going to school, families building homes, workers earning a living, people who didn't choose to be part of a geopolitical mystery, but were born into it. Imagine holding a passport that most countries won't accept. Imagine trying to travel only to be told your nationality isn't recognized. Imagine explaining to someone that your country exists, only for them to look at you with confusion. That's the everyday reality for millions of people. And yet, life goes on. Because humans adapt. They always do. They create systems, communities, identities, even in places the world refuses to acknowledge. And maybe that's the most fascinating part of this entire mystery. Not the politics, not the borders, but the resilience of the people. The ability to exist, even when existence itself is questioned. But here's the part most people don't realize. These hidden countries aren't rare exceptions. They are part of a much larger pattern. A pattern that suggests the world map we know is incomplete. Because beyond the recognized nations, beyond the official borders, there are dozens of territories, regions, and micronations that exist in this gray zone. Some are fighting for recognition. Others are content remaining hidden. Some may eventually become official countries. Others may disappear entirely. And the truth is, we don't know how many more will emerge in the future. Because the forces that create these places, conflict, identity, power struggles, are still very much alive. Right now, somewhere in the world, a region is questioning its place. Somewhere, people are debating independence. Somewhere, the seeds of a future, invisible country are being planted. And years from now, it might become the next mystery, the next place that exists, but doesn't. So the next time you look at a world map, remember this. What you see isn't the full picture. It's just the version the world agrees to show you. But beyond those borders, beyond those lines, there are stories that don't make it onto the map. Countries that exist in silence, nations that live in the shadows, and people who call those places home. And maybe the real question isn't, do these countries exist? Maybe the real question is, who gets to decide? If you found this story fascinating, there are even stranger mysteries hidden across the world. Places, events, and secrets that most people have never heard of. So make sure you subscribe, because the next video might just change the way you see the world forever.